Hello, my name is Elliot Jackson, National Convener and Chief Executive Officer of Children's Hearing Scotland. I'm conducting a series of one-to-one interviews with key figures across the hearing system, looking about our response to the pandemic over 2020. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Maree Todd MSP, the Minister of Children and Young People. Good morning, Minister, and welcome.
Morning, Elliot. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And listen, thank you very much for giving up the time in a very, very busy schedule, I'm sure, for the interview today. I have a few questions, a bit of a conversation, a bit of a chat, and about, I suppose, where, looking back in March when lockdown was announced on the 23rd, and then we moved back to the First Minister announced face-to-face hearings back in May, and our response to the pandemic. You and I meet frequently and we give updates about what we're looking to do. So this was probably a real opportunity for you just to give a real sense of the background to government, to panel members, and I'm sure they'll be really appreciative of some of your thoughts. Maybe if we can cast our mind back to March, early March, when the pandemic began to take hold and government were looking at lockdown, etc. And then when it was announced, how worried were you at the beginning of lockdown about children and young people from your portfolio and the challenges to keep vulnerable children and young people safe, including the children's hearing system?
So it would be no exaggeration to say that they've been at the front of my mind throughout the pandemic, and I think all of government. The day, the 23rd, when we closed down, and the day that we shut the schools, that was such a momentous step. It's never happened before. Cancelled the exam diet and sent everyone home and said, stay at home. And immediately we were aware that some children are not safe at home. That was right at the front of our minds. So we're telling everyone to stay home, but some children are more vulnerable at home than they are at school. And it has been at the front of our minds throughout. The children's hearing, it's phenomenal to see how you all responded and how quickly you pivoted to make sure that the role that the children's hearing system plays to look after these vulnerable children was able to continue, and these children were able to be protected. If I think, I've said it a lot of times, like, I love my job. I think I have the best job in government. And part of that is because I have responsibility for early learning and childcare. So most days, pre-pandemic, I would be able to cuddle a baby. I'd be able to play with toddlers in mud and explore dinosaurs, all those fabulous things, climb trees, like that's actually part of my job. But one of the other parts of my job, so as well as having responsibility for early education and childcare up to 0 to 5, I have responsibility for looked after children and for social work and for the children's hearing system. And I have that potential to make a difference to some of the most vulnerable citizens in Scotland. And they are at the forefront of my mind. Shortly before the pandemic, I had met with some kinship care families, and I tell you, these families. So this woman described to me about living in a 3-bedroomed house with 5 children, ranging from a toddler up to a child doing her hires, a 3-bedroomed house. And she's the granny looking after these children. And on that day in the chamber, when John Swinney was saying that we were closing the schools, I was thinking, how's that family going to manage? How are they going to cope? And it is just absolutely at the forefront of our mind. We have, and all the way throughout, we've thought about these people and about how we can best reach them. And there's been some great stuff. So not just the Children's Hearing Service, but in other areas, we have found that actually it was simpler and easier to come alongside families and support them. And families found strength that they didn't know they had. But there's no doubt, nearly everyone in society has been tipped into feeling vulnerable. There's another thing. Families are vulnerable who have never been vulnerable before. So, yeah, we think about them a lot. But I always have thought about them a lot.
Your passion for your portfolio is undeniable, Minister, and it's great to hear a little bit about the history of how decisions were made and how you felt. I suppose again, just looking at when we flipped the hearing system from almost solely face-to-face to virtual. We've also got the digital poverty angle as well, where again the government are looking to support lots of local authorities or families within local authorities through the provision of kit. I suppose maybe give us a little bit of the thinking that again from government perspective about rushing out all of that technical kit to support, obviously from our perspective, families and young people participating in hearings.
So I suppose one of the main thrusts of getting that kit to people was educational. So as soon as children went home, there was a recognition that in order to continue education, they needed digital kit to be able to connect with their schools and engage in learning. But we were always very clear that it needed to do more than that, and that if children were getting this equipment, they needed to be able, those children who needed it needed to be able to access their children's hearing. There's also access to health. So if I think about, NHS Near Me, which is a way of accessing healthcare through, a meeting like this, and that's always existed up here in the Highlands. We've always done it because the distances are so huge and it's quite hard to, it can take a day of your life to get to see a specialist at Raigmore. But that became a much bigger feature of everyone's access to healthcare. So the focus was definitely on education, but we wanted to make sure that children could use these devices for children's hearings if they needed it, health, and also social. Because if you think about it, every family in the land, I mean, nobody knew what Zoom was before the pandemic.
Yes.
And then every family in the land is doing family quizzes on a Saturday night through Zoom. And we wanted to make sure that no one was left behind in that, because the social side of things is really important as well. So we wanted to get digital kit into children's hands, but we wanted them, absolutely key to that, we wanted them to have connectivity as well as the actual piece of equipment. So we wanted them to be able to use it, and we wanted that piece of kit to be suitable for everything, because suddenly life in its entirety was happening digitally. So a lot of work went into that. Largely, I mean, the fastest way to do it, and this is the phenomenal thing, some of our third sector partners were there right alongside the people we needed to reach, in place, ready to do the job, and they were able to very quickly take equipment that we could get a hold of. And remember, this was a worldwide phenomenon, so it was quite hard to actually even order the computers. And China, where many of these things are made, had the pandemic first, so there was all sorts of logistical challenges involved in it. But everybody, absolutely everybody, recognised the importance of it and stepped up and rose to the challenge. And I think that's pretty impressive. There are still gaps. So there are still children who are not digitally connected, but it's in a significantly better place than it was at the start of the pandemic. And it is not something we've taken our eye off. So we're not saying that's it, job done. We are making sure that we continue to make progress on that. And local authorities and all of our partners are now involved in that, ensuring that we reach people digitally. Some places were better off. So like in Highland, almost everyone already had a Chromebook. All the kids in schools had a Chromebook. And I tell you, that was such a contested decision at the time it came in. But that looks like absolute genius with hindsight. Who'd have thought it would be quite so useful?
Absolutely. Again, we thank the government for their support, because we have rolled out, over 1,000 Chromebooks as well to panel members who are now doing virtual hearings. Looking back, I suppose, going back from our service and back in March where we moved to virtual hearings, I suppose, and I know you've spoken to me with great pride about the role and contribution, where you've got 2,500 panel members supported by 500 area support team members, simply flipping the service overnight to online. So, not only did they...
It's absolutely incredible. And it literally took weeks from start. I mean, that is just amazing. And that just shows you, I mean, I have been in awe of what Children's Hearing panel volunteers, the entire Children's Hearing family do for a long time, ever since I've been minister. And you know that. I mean, I've done some volunteering in my time, but oh boy, this is a big ask. But within, and at a time when every family was feeling vulnerable, at a time when many families were facing health risks, many families were facing financial difficulties, and at that very time, the children's hearing system pivoted, turned to face this challenge and said, we will do what we need to do to protect these vulnerable children. And it's just phenomenal. I mean, you know, I joke about the whole world getting the hang of Zoom. I found that hard. You know, I always say I am significantly older than I look. This stuff is not innate. And just, you know, switching over to Teams, switching over to Zoom, making sure we were able to connect, making sure we were able to keep up to speed, protecting children's rights in all of that, and, you know, protecting them from harm. Just, and you know, just the when I think as well, you know, like my MSP office, we had the most massive onslaught of people looking for help, and people were, you know, all of my staff have found it really tough. Everyone has found it hard because you're exposed to real human trauma, really challenging, tough things happening, and you feel almost powerless to help. And I think we all got an insight into what children's hearings panel members and volunteers are exposed to all of the time. And they have to, you know, at a time when your own family is under pressure, when you are finding it hard, when the world is finding it hard, when everything is difficult, you have to change the way that you work, and you still have to meet the needs of these really vulnerable children and face these really, really difficult situations and tensions. I mean, it's just incredible. And I'm so proud and so grateful for what they've done.
I mean,
we owe them. Scotland owes them.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, in terms of a role of working with area conveners on a weekly basis, updating them of our recovery plan and putting in place plans up to December, and then we start into with a increasing number of hearings into New Year. But we'll come on to that. I suppose just some of the research that we're hearing. And often, with anecdotally from panel members, is actually not only are they being able to learn new skills about engaging young people through the medium of Teams and Zoom and Vicine, etc. Some other young people are actually saying that they're actually getting more out of the young person because they feel that they can speak. Because again, that's an interesting one. So I think it's probably back to that bit about protecting the gains that we've made going through this and having a look at how this works.
So you can imagine I've reflected on that a lot. We did it. I mean, we did a fair bit of virtual working, just again because of, within my MSP team, with it because of the geography. You know, I quite far north. I'm not always in Edinburgh, but I'm not always at home when I'm you know, when I'm here. I cover an area that's half the landmass of Scotland as a Highlands and Islands MSP. So I thought we were quite good at the virtual stuff, but you know, we have come on a lot during this period of time, and I've learned a lot, and I think there are some real gains. And I look back and I think, gosh, you know, there were times when I would be traveling, you know, an 8-hour round trip down to Edinburgh for a meeting, which could happen this way. There are times when I think actually that works better when I'm relaxed at home, and I think that's what we're seeing with the hearings. The NHS near me, again, it's an example I know quite a lot about because my background as a health professional, and it was pharmacy were very involved in developing that. And one of the beautiful things we see in that scheme, and I think we're seeing it in the children's hearings, is where there is a power imbalance in the relationship and you want to tackle that power imbalance, so where there's somebody very much in charge, but you want to empower the other individual to be able to speak up, this type of platform helps. So it levels that power imbalance, and it's something about being relaxed and being in your own home. So it applies to patients who, you know, often they walk through the door of a hospital and start to conform with what they're told to do. And it's the same with, children at children's hearings. There's something about the environment, and we have tried so hard over the years to make that more welcoming and child-friendly and less institutional and less daunting to children who walk through the door. But there's something really powerful about being in your own home and how freely you're able to speak and how emboldened you feel. And I think that is well worth us examining and capturing. And because, all of us, absolutely everyone, wants to make sure that we get it right for these children.
Yeah, and again, you and I, we were working with the Promise team into early 2021, and there's lots of read across to some of the Promise recommendations about virtual hearings and allowing children, young people to select where they want to come in from, etc. So again, I get that. I think at the outset, again, one of the things, we're all about protecting vulnerable children in the hearing system, and one of the big boosts for the hearing system, panel members, etc., was being categorised as an essential service. Again, and I suppose maybe it's just to get a little sense of, you briefed the First Minister and keeping her in touch with progress, etc., but maybe give us a little bit of the background to that decision and let us understand a little bit more.
So I don't think I can take credit for drawing the First Minister's attention to these children, and I think it's very clear. So one of the reasons I love my job is because it's really easy in many ways. I don't have to fight to attract attention to my portfolio. The Scottish Government is very focused on children. It's very focused on these very vulnerable children, and we are determined to close the attainment gap. We're determined to improve the care system, all of those things. So the First Minister is already absolutely laser focused on these people, and I have no doubt that that day when we're in the chamber announcing that the school's closed, and I'm thinking immediately about families that I've met over the previous months, I know that I have absolutely no doubt that the Deputy First Minister was in the same boat and the First Minister was in the same boat. That was a massive, in a year of massive decisions, that was a massive decision. So I can't claim credit for drawing her attention to it. She is already, and I guess it's great that it felt like recognition for the children's hearing system, but oh boy, she cares already. She cares, and she knows the difference that you make to these children. And because we're so determined to ensure that these children are supported and protected and enabled to flourish, of course you're an essential system.
Okay, thank you for that. And that will be, I suppose, just hearing it from you, Minister, will be really, really important for panel members really to understand it. I think I can say it, our colleagues can say it, but to hear it from you is really, really great and special. I suppose looking now into 2021, okay, so we'll all have our Christmas, whatever that looks like, and then we'll get back in 2021 with the promise of a vaccine sometime in the spring. Bringing it back to children's hearings, and what do you need from us? What are your kind of thoughts about our 2021 start? What would you like to say to us?
So I think I need more of the same, and probably even more than that. So you've done the pivoting, you've done the transformation, you've changed the way that you operate. But there is a backlog. So for all of that effort, there is still, there's still a catch up to be done. And there is a sense or a concern that there is more vulnerability, so that there might be more work to be done than there ever was before, because families are really, they are really suffering. Everybody is suffering in this pandemic. So I need you all to take care of yourself. I need you to stay strong. I need you to, understanding the level of trauma that you're exposed to. I need you to make sure that you keep your strength up. And I need you to do more of the same, because I think there is going to be a lot more work ahead.
Absolutely, Minister. And I think these are the key messages. Of course, we start off with a recruitment campaign. for more panel members in 2021, hoping that lots of people in Scotland will make New Year's resolutions to volunteer and to become a panel member. I suppose if you were standing next to somebody and they were considering whether to join the children's hearing system, what would be your messages to them to join the hearing system?
I'd say go for it. Go for it, because you will make such an. I mean, if you want to make a difference, and I mean, volunteering is very altruistic, but there's something that you get back, and that knowing that you make a difference to some of the most vulnerable people in the whole of Scotland is huge. So go for it. You will find a family that are ready to welcome you with open arms, to support you, to do the tough job that we're asking you to do, and you will make a difference. The other thing I would say, so one of the benefits of the last year is that we might just be able to attract some of those people who found it hard to volunteer before. So I don't think, and I don't want to burst everyone's bubble, I don't think life's going to go back to normal immediately by Easter. I think we're going to be working this way for a wee while to come. And I think, as we both said, there are gains from working this way that we want to hang on to. So there might well be, you know, people in certain types of jobs who found now that they're working from home, they are able to volunteer as a panel member. There might be people who worked certain shift patterns that made it difficult for them to volunteer that might find it easier to do it now. So I think there's a chance that we can reach people that we weren't able to before. And I would say go for it, because you'll make the most enormous difference.
Thank you, Minister. I think you might have just become one of our biggest recruiting sergeants in terms of that clip. Okay, drawing to a close then, perhaps just to thank you for your insight and for your warm words and reflections around the last 8 months. Our panel community continue to work incredibly hard, and it's brilliant that you recognise the role and contribution, and that will come as a real kind of support to them. And I think the boost for 2021 is there, and we look forward to hearing from you in 2021 as we progress through that year. Meantime, Maree Todd, Minister for Children and Young People, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.